end of 2009, things looked pretty great for our 26-year-old sister, Charity. Her opera career was flourishing. She was traveling all over the world. She had a wonderful boyfriend. Life was generally pretty fantastic, except for the fact that she was about to die. 5 years after being diagnosed with a critical illness, there was no longer any hope of her condition improving or even stabilizing. Doctors gave Charity 6 months to live. Her only chance at survival was a lung transplant.
And here's the thing about lung transplants. Nobody wants one. But when you need one, you really need one. And unfortunately, the average wait time for a set of lungs in the United States is 1,000 days. And for those of you who, like me, are not mathematically inclined, 1,000 days is more than 6 months. So Charity's prospects were not looking very good. And she wasn't the only one waiting. There are over 110,000 people on the national transplant waitlist. 110,000 people, 20 of whom die every single day for want of a suitable organ.
Let's think about that for a second. That means that every single year, more Americans die waiting for transplants than have died during the entire duration of US military involvement in both Iraq and Afghanistan. Charity was tremendously lucky, and a set of organs matching her needs became available before her lungs failed completely. But during her transplant and subsequent recovery, we saw hospital room after hospital room filled with patients waiting for their transplants. We saw hopelessness, we saw desperation, and we knew there had to be a way to make this system better.
Which begs the question, what is the system? Currently, the United States operates on an opt-in model of organ procurement, which means practically, in most states, when you sign up for your driver's license, there will be a little box asking you whether you want to become an organ donor, and you can check it off. Good enough, right?
Well, not really. We've spoken about organ scarcity, but the disturbing thing is it doesn't have to be this way. Let's think of two countries, Austria and Germany. They are very similar, they share a language, and their cultures are really similar. But they operate on two different systems of organ procurement. In Austria, people are presumed to be organ donors unless they opt out of the program, and 99% of the population have chosen to be organ donors. In Germany, where they have an opt-in system very similar to the one we have here in the States, 12% of the population are organ donors. This discrepancy is astonishing, but not totally confounding.
In the United States, 90% of people support organ donation. The only other thing I can think of that 90% of Americans all agree on is that it's really hard to find something that 90% of Americans agree on. And but at the same time, only 40% are actually registered as donors. And we wanted to change that.
After researching our options, we decided to propose a bill to the Colorado State Legislature that would change our system of organ procurement. Simply put, the bill would have added a page to the driver's license application asking those who didn't want to be donors to initial a statement to that effect. Then applicants' donor status would be verbally confirmed by a DMV employee.
It was a gradual process, so no one's donor status would be changed without their express knowledge and consent.
But this little change could make a huge difference. Unfortunately, some Coloradans saw it differently.
We woke up one morning to find that the Associated Press had broken the story about our bill, as we will refer to it, which may be a little selfish, but and it was everywhere. And You know, most of the stories weren't exactly what I'd call negative, but they were all inaccurate. And when you're dealing with an issue as sensitive as organ donation, where human lives are literally in the balance, you need to be very careful. And these stories are not what I would consider careful.
The media onslaught inspired a very enthusiastic response from Coloradans, and a lot of them decided to contact their legislators. But I think something got lost in translation because a lot of them thought that the bill would legalize government-sanctioned body snatching.
In this toxic environment where reading a snappy headline became more important than actually understanding the legislation, we didn't really have a chance, and the bill was withdrawn.
We often accept things as adequate merely because they exist. But by doing so, we unwittingly cordon off opportunities for much needed progress. Before Charity's transplant, we hardly ever questioned the efficacy of our opt-in system and never contemplated doing anything to change it. It took our sister's impending death to get us to recognize the existence of this very real problem, to knock us out of our apathy and into some sort of action.
Mercina and I learned firsthand that changing norms isn't easy. People will disagree with you, and they will be very vocal about it. But we failed. We failed when we were trying to pass this bill. But that failure does not necessarily preclude our success. Our ultimate goal is to reduce the number of people that die on the national transplant waitlist. Whether we do that through legislation or merely by talking to people about organ donation makes no difference.
Getting a few more people to become organ donors may not seem like a big deal, especially when measured against the challenge of saving thousands of lives every year. But it is a big deal, especially when the person whose life is being saved is your sister. Last week, we were able to watch as Charity and her new lungs debuted at Lincoln Center in New York City. And next week, we will gather together as a family as we celebrate her marriage. If it weren't for her transplant, Charity wouldn't be able to do any of these things. She wouldn't be alive. In order for more people like Charity to fulfill their astonishing potential, we cannot accept the unexamined status quo.
Organ donation isn't the only area where there's room for improvement. The world is rife with opportunity, from healthcare to housing and education to irrigation. There is always a way to make good enough better, but only if someone is willing to take the effort to nudge it in that direction. And we hope some of you are here tonight. Thank you very much.